Hello everyone, my name is Pauletta.
And I'm Christina.
And today we're going to be doing Soul Tasty. And this is in celebration of this year's Black History Month. In preparation for Black History Month, we decided to make some Jazzy Cornbread.
And some BlackEyed Peas.
And so while we're doing a tutorial, you'll also be receiving a history lesson on why these foods are so important to the African diaspora. So stay tuned and watch as we get into it.
So the first thing we're gonna get started with is our BlackEyed Peas because they take the longest time to cook. So what we'll need, of course, is BlackEyed Peas. I prefer to use frozen. You can also use canned, or you could even use dry. If you're using dry, you'll need to soak them overnight in order to get them ready. Next, we wanna have our little bit of fat for the flavor. Traditionally, meat was used, and especially pork, but now since we're trying to be more health conscious, a good plant-based butter will do. For our seasonings, we want garlic salt, seasoned salt, a little black pepper, a pinch of adobo, and lastly, my favorite, Mrs. Dash Table Blend, and it's salt-free, so it's good and healthy. So now we're ready to go. We've opened our peas and we're just gonna pour them into the pot. And the next thing we wanna do is cover them with just enough water to actually cover the peas. Not too much because since they're frozen, they'll kind of create some of their own water. But if you were using dry or canned, this would be a little bit different. Then we'll put our seasonings, and really you just season to taste. A little crushed black pepper. I like to use the freshly ground, but if you already have ground black pepper, that's fine too. Mrs. Dash. And a pinch of adobo. And lastly, we're gonna add some of that good plant-based butter. Maybe about a teaspoon and a half. Put the lid on, bring them to a boil, and let it simmer. Now once we get our peas in the pot and the lid on, we're gonna turn it onto a medium-high heat. Once this comes to a rolling boil, we'll turn it back down to low and let it simmer for the duration. Now, BlackEyed Peas are actually not a pea at all. They're rather a legume, and they were transported to the West Indies from West Africa by enslaved persons during the transatlantic slave trade. They are a good source of nutrition and protein, and they help to sustain enslaved people while they were working and living in a foreign land.
So next, I'm going to prepare the Jazzy Cornbread. The ingredients I have for this recipe is hot rice cornmeal. You'll need 1 large egg, garlic powder, some paprika for a savory taste, a teaspoon of salt, a teaspoon of baking powder, half a cup of almond milk, 2 tablespoons of mayo, olive oil, and last but not least, in order to make it extra colorful, we'll be adding some red bell pepper and green bell pepper. So I'm starting out with my cornmeal. I'm going to do 2 cups of cornmeal. This is my first one. And then next, we're going to measure out half a cup of almond milk. One teaspoon of baking powder. Add our seasonings. And you can add as much paprika or as little as you want to. For me, I like to add a nice generous amount because it gives this a great color once it's rising in the oven. Garlic powder to enhance the paprika and also the salt that we're going to add later. Be generous with the garlic powder. Also a teaspoon of salt. Two tablespoons of mayo. Next, I'm going to crack 1 egg. And don't forget to add a little oil inside of your batter as well. So I added about a tablespoon to start out with. As you go along, you can gauge how much you want to add if you feel like it needs some more moisture inside of it. Now I'm going to whisk. Okay, I'm going to add a little bit more olive oil in here just to make it a little more liquidy. You don't want it too liquidy though. So I added about another tablespoon of our EVOO. And I'm also going to add a little bit more almond milk to it. Okay, so now that I've added all of my dry ingredients to the batter, I'm now going to cut up the bell pepper halves. So it's really up to you how you want to cut it up. I like to do smaller pieces. So I cut them up in strips first, and then I'm going to make them even smaller. So same for the green bell pepper. I'm gonna remove the whisk, and then I'm gonna take the spoon that I used to put the mayo in and just do my own mixing with it. So once again, this is your preference, but I like to add a little more paprika just to give it some more color. And so that's what your batter should look like at this time. So now I have put the entire batter into the pan so that it can go into the oven. So you want to set your oven at 400 degrees Fahrenheit. And you want to make sure that you bake your Jazzy cornbread for 20 to 25 minutes or until it's golden brown. So during American chattel slavery, cornbread was actually given to enslaved people to provide their nutritional needs. But at the time, it did anything but. But over time, as enslaved people became more Americanized, they found other ways in order to revamp the recipe. Jazzy cornbread is just one example of how cornbread is made in the United States. There are many other variations, and depending on which region of the South or maybe the Midwest you're from, people tend to add or take away from the original recipe. It also goes by many other names: hoe cakes, Johnny bread, stovetop cornbread, hot water cornbread. All of that depends on where your family may have settled or traveled to later on within history.
All right, and so now everything's done and we're ready to plate and taste.
Go ahead and cut into this Jazzy cornbread.
Ooh, that looks so good, Pauletta. Can't wait to try it. It's nice and colorful. And while Pauletta's cutting that, I'm just gonna go ahead and spoon up some black-eyed peas. Thank you. Alright, and so black-eyed peas and cornbread are very traditional foods, not only for African Americans, but you know, in the South in general. And since it is a new year, Pauletta, these foods are especially important because, you know, we eat black-eyed peas and cornbread in the new year. Black-eyed peas are actually representative of coins, and you eat them for luck and good fortune in the new year.
And if we had a pot of greens, the greens would represent dollar cash.
Right.
But since we don't, we have the cornbread. And so also going with the theme of luck, the cornbread is the gold. So here we have coins and gold for the new year.
Right. So you eat up to make sure you have good fortune.
Yes. So we just want to wish everybody a happy Black History Month, and thank you so much for watching our Soul Tasty episode.
All right. Thanks, everyone. That's really good.